guys!
Welcome back to Tandem Fandom Top 10. I'm Courtney.
I'm Mick.
And we are moving right along in our list, bringing you number 4 and number 3 of the top 10 things we want to see return to professional wrestling, particularly inserted into the WWE.
That's right, brothers. We want to see these changes because we are in a new era. And we want to see these changes because we believe that this is a way that you can improve this business that we love.
We love it so much.
So much. Now, without further ado, let us dive in to the list. So we are in a new era of professional wrestling, but I think the one thing that WWE can do, considering their back catalog, considering everything that they own, and in terms of intellectual properties,
right,
and more so than that, legacies and histories.
Yes.
Why not bring back WCW pay-per-views?
Yes.
At number 4, that's what we got, daddy.
Yeah, we need some good classic stuff, especially because they do have the vault, they do have this library on the network. What better way to bring some of that history back to life than to bring back some of those good old-fashioned pay-per-views, like Starrcade.
Ooh.
Like, top of the list,
Yeah,
Starrcade,
absolutely.
for sure.
Halloween Havoc, and they've done this one in the past, the Great American Bash. They are bringing back the Clash of Champions, which is not necessarily a WCW event, it's more of a Jim Crockett Promotions event, but same thing basically.
Eventually.
Fall Brawl.
Yes, Super Brawl.
And possibly going back to what we've said in the past of working with smaller promotions, something like, the Japan Super Show,
right,
or
when Worlds Collide.
Yeah, that they did with AAA. I mean, when you look at some of the WWE's pay-per-view schedules, and you look at some of the names, you look at a Payback, you look at a Fastlane, and there's no history associated with that. I think, especially now, with 2 brands, unique rosters, unique storylines, the importance of bringing back some of this history makes the event seem more important.
Yes.
When I say to you, hey, Seth Rollins is defending his title at Fastlane, it doesn't...
It doesn't resonate with seasoned fans.
No, because you look at that and you're like, well, Fastlane doesn't matter because WrestleMania is right around the corner.
Right.
We're on the fast lane to WrestleMania. So I understand the name and I understand the use of it, but I feel like if you would to have Super Brawl right before WrestleMania, you can start showing video packages from Super Brawl 3 and talk about things that happened then, as opposed to, hey, it's Fastlane. We're on the fast lane to WrestleMania, because you don't care about what happened at last year's Fastlane, because there's not a lot of history there. It's only been around for a few years.
Right. Well, with pay-per-views like that, they're basically just super shows.
Yeah.
Like ECW used to do.
Yeah.
It's just continuations of storylines to get you to the next pay-per-view.
Yeah.
It may as well just be a big Raw or a big SmackDown.
We saw this earlier this year where they did the Roadblock special where it was a house show. The world title was on the line with Dean winning against Triple H, but that, to me, that's sort of what, like, Payback and Fastlane feel like.
Yeah, just super shows.
Yeah, it's just a name on an event. And granted, when WCW ran a lot of these shows, you didn't have 12 pay-per-views a year. You only had 5 or 6. You didn't have a ton. And WWF used to do the same thing. They only had a few events. But that's why SummerSlam, Survivor Series, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, that's why they're important.
Yes.
Because they have a history associated with them. I mean, Survivor Series, for the most part, tends to be shit. Because it's that awful, like, team good guy versus team bad guy. Very rarely does it mean anything, but it means something.
But it's been around since '87.
Yeah, that's a history and a legacy associated with it. So if you bring back more of those WCW pay-per-views, you bring back a history, you bring back a legacy. And not to mention, with Halloween Havoc, you can gimmick the shit out of that pay-per-view. You could have an entire theme. You could have some ghoulish matches if you want, you know. Same thing with like Clash of Champions. You can make it very grand.
Yes.
You can make it very big. Starrcade. You could have that be your December pay-per-view, which I believe it was for WCW typically. They would hold it in December. It's the year end.
Yeah,
make it very grand.
The culmination of the year.
And we're seeing a lot of honoring of the past of WCW achievements with guys like Sting in the Hall of Fame, with the Dusty Rhodes Classic, with the Four Horsemen being in the Hall of Fame, with Ric Flair being 2-time Hall of Fame.
Right.
Why not utilize these guys while you still have them? You could bring in Sting to make an appearance and talk about the importance of a Starrcade or a Super Brawl or a Halloween Havoc. A Ric Flair to come in and talk about, you know, Flair for the Gold and the history associated. You know, you could do so many of these things to help inject them, you know, using the past to help the present.
Yes, because we do have this new era. The universe is going in a fantastic direction, but you can bolster it even more, not necessarily by skipping over the Ruthless Aggression era and the Attitude era and that kind of period in the between the 90s and like 2010. Maybe we should, but you can bolster this new era and give it that rich history from like 1930 and on to see where we've come and how far and still honoring it.
Exactly. And I understand to a point, Vince is like, oh, it's my company, I won the war, pal. And yes, you did, but that's why you should be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do Starrcade better than they ever did. Because here's the simple fact. Pro wrestling existed outside of the WWF.
What?
There's this, right? I know, it's crazy. And yes, WCW, you know, was kicking Vince's ass, but he won the war. You own all of this stuff. You can go onto the network, and that's really the key.
Yes.
Network subscriptions. You can say on USA Network, on Raw, about how coming up, the return of Starrcade. Subscribe to the WWE Network for only $9.99 and you can watch the extensive history of Starrcade.
Yeah, watch all of these great moments. Starrcade implemented by Dusty Rhodes, the late great Dusty Rhodes. So-and-so is going to be headlining this Starrcade just like so-and-so from 19 whatever.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes successful.
Make it grand.
Yeah, make it a big deal. Make it important because... And you know what?
Watch these specific moments on the network.
Yeah. And looking at it like this, because, you know, WWF for a long time, WWE, whatever, had, you know, pay-per-views like Backlash. You know, Backlash was your post-WrestleMania show. You also had No Way Out, which was your pre-WrestleMania show. They got rid of those names. They used them for a few years, and then they stopped using them. They had No Mercy. They got rid of that. So, when I look at that, and I look at like a Fastlane, I look at a Payback, I look at even Extreme Rules, which is the, you know, post One Night Stand for ECW.
Man.
I look at these pay-per-views, that's why they don't mean anything, because there is no history. Backlash was around for a few years, then you just changed the name.
Yeah.
So the event means less.
Yeah, like the event itself has no heart.
Yeah, it doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have a history, and, you know, supposedly they're bringing back shows like Backlash, so it's kind of like, oh, cool, Backlash is coming back, but to me, it doesn't have that same oomph as like a Starrcade or Super Brawl, because those events were huge, because much like Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, WrestleMania, they were some of the very few pay-per-views that existed, so it was a big deal.
Right.
And when we say bring back WCW pay-per-views, we're not saying bring back Greed or Sold Out or Mayhem. We're not saying that. We're saying bring back a tradition, bring back a history. It's so rich, it's on the network. You're really doing yourself a favor by doing so. So bring it back, Vinnie Mac!
Yes.
So, moving on from pay-per-views, but something I feel that ties in pretty well with these pay-per-views.
Yes.
Would be the use of less gimmick matches.
Yeah, just kind of rack them back, especially on like regular TV. Maybe not do them every pay-per-view. No, like, we don't need, every time it's a 6-man match, it doesn't have to be a ladder match.
Yeah. Because I think when you look at it, and there is an argument to be made that our attention span in this day and age is a lot shorter.
Well, there's so many other things that we can turn to.
Sorry. But, our attention spans is much shorter, and that's an argument that people have made of, like, you really have to do a lot of crazy stuff in a match because it's not too long before somebody picks up the smartphone and starts scrolling, I understand that to an extent, but I believe when you are giving us ladder matches, when you are giving us Hell in a Cell, when you're giving us Elimination Chamber, cage matches, no DQ, street fight, all of these things, as much as we are given, they're not special anymore.
Right.
TLC, think about the very first TLC match, or, at WrestleMania 17 with the TLC match. It was special because we hadn't really seen that.
Yeah.
So when they went out there and they took these bumps and they did that crazy shit, we were blown away because we hadn't seen that before. We had never seen that before. Hell in a Cell was special because it was intense and it was used sparingly.
Yeah, specifically to tell stories.
Mm-hmm. When the Elimination Chamber was debuted, we were blown away. We had never seen anything like this before. And it was used sparingly to tell a story, to get a point across. Ring of Honor does this with their matches without honor, their no DQ matches. They are used at the culmination of a big story to where it matters. We saw it with Kevin Steen against El Generico. Most recently, Steve Corino and BJ Whitmer.
Right. It was just, they just kept clashing. There was no other option.
And it comes to a point where we most recently saw Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens in a regular match for their end of their feud. This is the end of the line right here. And it was a regular match. It was an amazing match, but maybe if they'd have done a no DQ, essentially WWE's Fight Without Honor, unsanctioned match, if you will, to settle the score.
Count anywhere.
Yeah. It would have been that bigger, or that much bigger, that much more important, but they didn't even do that because, well, we saw Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose have an Asylum match, and I appreciate creating a new style of match to give us something new, but if you rack back on it, you don't have to. And that's where, like, using WCW pay-per-views comes in, because, well, you don't have to call the pay-per-view TLC, and you don't have to have so many gimmick matches. Remember, tables, ladders, chairs, and stairs?
Oh my goodness.
Holy shit, man. And
they're just grasping at strings.
Well, and especially when you look at WWE today, the lack of blood, and I understand it, I understand from a safety standpoint. I get all of that, but using these extreme matches, which are career shorteners, it loses its luster, it loses its importance.
Well, this most recent WrestleMania and the WrestleMania before, the 2015 WrestleMania, there was a ladder match for the IC title, and it was literally, it was a few different guys. It was the exact same match, like
pretty much
spot for spot. They did the exact same things, and I was really disillusioned, because of course I loved the 2015 one because Stardust was involved. Yeah. So I watched, my eyes were glued to the screen. And then I watched the one earlier this year. It was literally the exact same match.
I think at some point you are trying to reinvent the wheel. If you limit the amount of it, it seems important. NXT is a prime example. We have seen, I think, 2 ladder matches, 1 cage match, Iron Man match, but it's used so sparingly. And granted, NXT does have less, pay-per-view style events.
Right.
But even still, it was used to further a story,
Yeah,
to tell a story.
The steel cage was used because Samoa Joe and Finn could not contain themselves.
Yeah. And it worked. It worked in terms of the story they were telling. Bayley and Sasha in the Iron Man match helped tell their story, prove who was better.
Right.
And it's things like that, when they're used sparingly, they can still be great. Because how many damn cage matches have we seen on Raw, on SmackDown, on a pretty regular basis?
We saw a cage match at a house show.
Yeah. And
with WWE.
And
it was cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a great match. But you look at like Joe and Finn, they had one of the best cage matches I've seen recently. Maybe it's kind of like a magic trick where I'm thinking it was better than it was, but the stakes felt higher. It felt more important. It felt like, oh shit, they're locking them in the cage.
Right. It wasn't just happening. It wasn't like, oh, you're going out, it's a triple threat. You're going out, it's a tag team match. You're going out, it's Hell in a Cell.
Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair cage match where the Horsemen break Dusty's leg. It worked. It worked because you didn't see this all the time. Dusty Rhodes versus superstar Billy Graham in the bull rope match.
Yeah.
These matches can help you tell a story when you're not doing them all the time. They can help make us say, I need to pay attention to this wrestling match because
it's going to another level.
Yeah, and not to mention, if we aren't constantly overexposed to this style of match, I feel like it helps the wrestlers say, I gotta improve what I'm doing.
Right.
I can slow down because we can build to something that's more, where I'm going to a higher level, where I'm taking it to a more intense level. And I do. As much as I love a good ladder match or a good, cage match or whatever, less gimmick matches. Using more wrestling style matches. I Quit. Iron Man. Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, Iron Man match on SmackDown is one of the best matches I've ever seen. Why aren't we doing more Iron Man matches? Yeah. Or even submission only, or, falls count anywhere, just using these things sparingly but smartly to help further feuds. Not just throwing a guy in there or saying, okay, well, we're going to have our multi-man match. Just throw a ladder in there.
Yeah.
Razor Ramon, Scott Hall made the ladder match amazing because we hadn't really seen it that much. To give perspective, Kenny Omega and Unbreakable Michael Elgin recently had the first ever, this is the 2016, the first ever ladder match in New Japan.
Wow.
That's amazing. They have never had a ladder match before. They had the first one. It was an incredible match. And again, I've seen a ton of them. I've seen a lot of ladder matches. New Japan's never had one, and it's 2016. They've been around since the 70s.
There you go. They survived without it.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you can still do amazing things. Why do we talk about Mick Foley and The Undertaker Hell in a Cell? Because of the huge bump. Because Hell in a Cell at that point had been scarcely used. It's one of those things. Rack them back.
Right. It needs to be one of those things where, oh, did you hear they're doing a table match at the next pay-per-view, not, oh, they're doing another table match.
Making them important again.
Yeah.
Making them make it seem like they matter. And it's like, well, you don't just tune in and see this all the time.
Right. Build to it. Escalate to it. Make it a reason that they're going through this extra bit of hardship.
And it even brings more importance to other things that you have established, like the Money in the Bank ladder match. I think that's very important.
Perfectly fine. That needs to happen every year. It's great. It's a wonderful concept.
But when you have multiple ladder matches throughout the rest of the year, it makes it harder for the wrestlers to say, well, okay, how do we do it? Well, we've got to include this spot, this spot, this spot, and this spot, because we did this and this. It's making it harder on them. So,
and more time in between, they can plan more different spots instead of having the exact same match.
Yeah, you can have guys say, okay, we're going to culminate this feud with this particular style of match. We haven't seen a lot of cage matches, so we can really go out there and do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I think they had to up the level of what they were doing for a while there in part to competition with WCW at first, you know, having to go more extreme. But after a while, it was kind of like, well, there is no competition, so we got to give you everything, so you keep coming back. I don't think you do it. I mean, for the longest time, the biggest high spot in the match was the damn drop kick.
Right? It was illegal to go to the top rope.
Yeah, you couldn't throw a close-fisted punch or you get DQ'd. Yet, they were still able to tell great stories and have great matches and drive stuff forward.
And when somebody did get knocked in the mush, it was special.
Yeah. But let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Please be sure to give that thumbs up if you liked the video, share it if you really liked it, and if you would be so kind to subscribe for more wrestling goodness.
Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep up with what we're doing and what we've done.
Tune in to the final entry into our top 10 things we'd like to see return to the WWE. And as we always say here on Tandem Fandom, I'm Mick.
I'm Courtney.
If you're going to be a fan,
bring a friend.